Hello everyone. I got this idea for this video from James Griffiths, and I will use these same titles, although somewhat different ways. Let's start with Inevitable Comeback. And from their first album in 1974 until Alive 3 in 1993, Kiss released either new studio or live album almost every year. But after that, the next album was 1996 Unplugged, and the next album was 1997 Carnival of Souls. But this album was recorded in 1995, and this was shelved because the Unplugged had resulted in the full reunion tour of the original four members. So this one was shelved because obviously this did not represent the original lineup, and Paul Stanley was completely against this album to begin with. But since this album got leaked and it became a bootleg album, they decided to release this, although it was very much a low-key release. They didn't make any press for this album at all. So the next year, 1998, they released Psycho Circus. And to their big disappointment, this was not a big commercial success. And after this album, they started talking that they will never make a new album. Paul Stanley especially was happy to tell that they would be a nostalgia act, and that they would be happy to remain just as a nostalgia act. And Gene Simmons said that there was no point in recording new albums because kids don't buy albums anymore. But I personally didn't believe that at all. I knew that at some point they would release a new album, and it did take 11 years until 2009 they finally released Sonic Boom. And I'm happy that they did, because I happen to think that this is a good album, but this one was not a big commercial success either. Okay, let's see. Let's take Misjudged Comeback next. I don't have a full album of this, but this is a compilation, Definitive Monkeys from 2001. And after their original breakup in the late 60s, Monkeys have returned a few times, and somewhere during the mid-80s they, I think, recorded a full album on a slip that they were in a swimming pool. And two of those songs are included on this compilation. And when you think that the rest of the stuff is from the 60s, can you imagine there's ever been a worse time for a band to return than the mid-80s? Those two songs are completely out of place on this album. Compared to the 60s stuff, they are just horrible songs, awful songs. They are completely out of place within this context. Okay, let's take the Showbiz Comeback. And this one is quite different to how James Griffiths used this. This is Say You Will by Fleetwood Mac, and their only studio album release with the Buckingham Nicks lineup after the breakup of this lineup after the release of Tango in a Night in 1987. Although this album does not include Christine McVie anymore. And this was not a commercial success like, for example, both the White Fleetwood Mac album in 1975 or Rumors in 1977 had been. But this was a big commercial success when you compare this to the previous two Fleetwood Mac studio albums. 1990 Behind a Mask, which had been a big commercial disappointment compared to the previous Buckingham Nicks album Tango in a Night. With the Behind a Mask, Lindsey Buckingham was not anymore a member. I still believe that album sold gold in the US, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a big disappointment compared to the Tango in a Night album. But even bigger disappointment was the follow-up Time, which was released in 1995, which didn't sell anything at all. And I believe that majority of the Fleetwood Mac fans hardly even knows that album exists. Okay, this next one is quite different kind of a showbiz return. This is a self-titled album by Judy Seal, originally released in 1971, and she only made 2 albums, this one and the follow-up 1973's Hard Food. And back in those days, these albums didn't really sold anything at all. But this was the first CD reissue in 2003, and after this CD issue, these albums have been reissued 4 times on CD, and I just noticed that this was again reissued on vinyl for the 2nd time, that is 3rd time including the original 70s issue. So I believe that these reissues have sold much more than what these albums sold originally in the early 70s. Okay, let's take a critical comeback. And Metallica Hardwired to Self-Destruct from 2016. Ever since the Black Album in 1991, Metallica fans, both the press and the fans, have been whining and moaning about their albums, that how awful they are, until this one was released. And this one has got very much positive press, both within the fans and the press. And like I have told this story before, but when this album was released, there was this comic strip in a music paper, in which there was a guy listening to the radio, and above it there was a text which said, Metallica fan gets disappointed. And in the text there was a guy who was thinking, what the fuck? Metallica didn't release a bad album, which in my opinion was a good joke on the fact how much Metallica fans and press loves to hate their albums ever since the Black Album. Okay, let's take the Pigs Will Fly comeback next. Okay, this is Dave or Dave Lindholm. Kerran translates as once. This was released in 1992. It's a live album, and Dave is one of those albums that, although he has never been a big commercial success, he has never released an album that would have sold gold record. He still has managed to make songs that have become either a radio hits or classics within his fans. But he mostly very much hates performing those songs live. There are a couple of songs that he does perform live, but mostly he does not perform those songs live. And this one was a tour to which his record company boss at the time convinced him to do. So he made a tour based on his hits, and he grudgingly agreed to do it, but he named the tour and his album Kerran Once, to make it clear that this would happen only this once. And 26 years later, he still has not repeated this thing. So with this in mind, one of his bands was in 1975 was Rock and Roll Band, which happens to be my favorite from him. And 30 years later, he returned with that band. And originally it was announced that they would make only this one gig at a summer festival. And I went to see them. I went to that festival around, was it 2 p.m., 3 p.m., only to find out that they actually had already performed by that time. So I didn't get to see them. Oh, by the way, this one includes 2 new studio songs. They recorded 1 single for their reunion, but those songs are nowhere near as good as the original album. So yeah, this one was like completely out of the blue reunion. I never would have expected that they return for 2 reasons. Obviously because Dave is so much against looking back on his career, and also because the other member, Pave Maijanen, he had been asked a couple of times that which gig does he think was the worst gig of his career, and he named one of Rock and Roll Band's gigs from 75 being the worst one, because Dave had drank so much that he had passed out before the gig, and because Dave was a lead guitarist and lead vocalist, leaving a drummer and a bassist to play the gig among themselves, it's no wonder that Pave has no good memories from that one. So based on those things, I never would have expected that they return. But yeah, luckily later that fall they returned to play a few more gigs, so I did manage to see them. And then let's take Back from the Dead, and this one again is quite different to James. This is Vasti Bunyan, just another Diamond Day, originally released in 1970. This CD reissue is from 2000. By the time this album was released in 1970, Vasti Bunyan had already left music business. She moved to some distant island, remote island, Outer Hebrides or something like that. And she completely vanished from music business until this CD reissue. Some fan of hers tracked her down there and convinced her to give permission, or I don't actually know, did she have any rights to, as far as the release was concerned, but anyway, he convinced her to give this one her approval, and 5 years later she finally made another album called Look Aftering. So after 35 years of being completely out of music business, she made another album. And similar thing is Mary Wise, Dangerous Game from 2007. Mary Wise was obviously very well known as the lead singer of Shangri-Las. After the breakup in the late 60s, I believe that Mary Wise continued to perform some solo gigs, but by the early 70s she had retired from music. And after that, to my knowledge, the only thing that she did in music was sometime during the, I guess it was late 80s. So manager realized that the name Shangri-Las was not registered, so he decided that anybody can use that, and he put up a band together and named them Shangri-Las, and actually even marketing them as being the original Shangri-Las, although the members were so young that they could not have been in the original Shangri-Las. And the original members of Shangri-Las did not take kindly to that, and they took it to court, but in order to win that court case they had to perform live, so they performed one live concert in order to get the rights for the name Shangri-Las. But to my knowledge, that is the only thing she did concerning music until this album. Well, they had, Mary Wise and the backing band had performed together live, but this was the first studio recording, and to my knowledge this is still the only studio recording that she has made. After this she did continue to perform live, at least some, for a couple of years, and to my knowledge she has retired from music again. Okay, I have one more, and I call this What? They Still Exist comeback, because this was not an actual comeback. This is Saxon Call to Arms. After their album Destiny in 87 or 88, Saxon was one of those bands who completely vanished from my consciousness. I simply had no idea that they still existed until early 2000s, when I found out that they were at least performing gigs. But I thought that they were simply playing gig here and there every now and then, until they released this album. And I thought that this was the first album that they released after Destiny album, only to find out after this was released that they had actually released during those about was it like 25 years between. During that period they had actually released several albums. I just had never heard about anything of those albums. So this one was a complete surprise to me, and I'm sure that there are similar stories with many of you. Okay, that's it for this time. Hope you like this. Leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Bye.